concept I always find myself coming back to is that of balance. Not a new concept, not a novel concept, but I think when it comes to logic and objective thinking and objective truth, balance kind of goes right in there. It fits in that same ballpark. And again, we talk about math a lot, and kind of the way we talk about the logic, and I think balance fits into that too. There's some sort of symmetry, there's some sense that it makes, and there's a balance to it. So I talk about it, I think about it a lot. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit in this video, and using the current social political environment as kind of a medium or a perspective to think about how balance is so important. And when I say that, there's the cliched phrase, or probably a lot of them, but every action has an opposite and equal reaction, which gets to this idea of balance. And I guess I generally believe part of logic is kind of a universal principle. I think, and again, it might be part of the same principle, it might be a different one. Balance is also a universal principle. You will have balance in all things in the universe, I guess. That's probably a bold statement, but so that's what that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It's tying to that principle. There will be balance one way or another. So if you apply that to the current political environment, let's say, and you are a really, really diehard, strong proponent of the Democratic liberal perspective, that party, you're all about it. When you talk about those issues, right? And I talked in a recent video about public figures, politicians. So let's say it's somebody that has an audience, particularly. When you talk about those issues and you talk about it in an extreme way, let's not even acknowledge if you're right, wrong, or indifferent, questioning your views. Let's just say the level at which you discuss them, right? The frequency, the volume, the tone, the extreme language that might be used, if there's emotion involved, the emotion that's interjected into it. When you put all that together and you put out views, my belief is that you are creating that opposite reaction, right? It has to balance out somehow. So when you go that far to your side, and this could go either way, right? It could be using a conservative, and you are ultimately. When you go that far that way, you're almost creating the reaction on the other extreme because it has to balance. So if you're all the way over there, that person needs to be all the way over there so that together there is a balance. And in many ways, that feels like what our society and our political environment is like today. It's become so extreme, so it has to be because each side is extreme. Right? And what do I mean by this? Pick an example, right? Trump is the perfect example. I've talked about him before. There is so much emotion. There is so much volume and frequency of commentary and opinion about him. And again, ignore the reasoning. If it's right, wrong, or indifferent, doesn't matter. There's just so much. You go on Twitter, you look at certain news, most news, a lot of news outlets, you read different things, you hear people talking. There is so much hate for him and everything that he does, right? That it's creating such a lopsided scale of it that it has to be evened out. It has to be balanced. So what you get is the extreme right. You get this extreme Trumpism supporting him regardless of the mistakes he makes and the things he says and all the different missteps. Because it's so extreme, the attack on him, it creates that other side. And the mechanism in this case in which I think that happens is when you're always criticizing something or the weight of it is so large, again, the volume, the frequency, the tone, the emotion, it dilutes the message. You lose credibility to an extent, right? If you let the truth just speak for itself, if you didn't say anything and you just let Trump be the story and his words and his actions at times, that would probably be enough for a lot of people to be like, this guy's, he's not fit to be president, whatever your view, right? Somebody more likely would come to that conclusion. But because it feels like everything is against him, it's hard to get there. It loses credibility. It dilutes the message. And you start to feel like, well, I don't know what's true from not anymore. And there just seem to be after him. And he generally aligns with my views anyway. So I'm going to defend him because he, needs to be defended. And this is so crazy how far they're going. And that's the example, right? That's that you do something, you go extreme, you go far. There's got to be balance. Those Trump supporters can't stay in the middle. It's almost a universal principle. They can't stay here if you're all the way out there, because then everything's skewed that way. They need to go all the way to the other side to bring the balance as a whole, right? That's ultimately what you're trying to do. So you think about that, and again, sticking with the political scenario, you can go on all sorts of different issues, social issues, racial issues, all these things can be part of it. If your goal is actually to affect change, if your goal is to, in the case of we're talking about with the liberals, trying to get Trump out of office, right? And to do that, you need people to vote. And let's just assume you need certain people that are in the middle, either independents or really, really kind of moderate Republicans. You need them to not vote for Trump. That's what you're trying to achieve. Well, I would argue the best way you could do that is thinking about this balance principle. The going belief seems to be, for most people, celebrities, politicians, etc., we will just overwhelm with attack on Trump. And if we flood everything, Twitter, the news, YouTube, if we flood it all with all the horrible things he's done, and now horrible becomes subjective, because a few days ago, one of the big things that was all over social media was that the White House redid the Rose Garden and people hated the way it looked, which, sure, you can have an opinion on that and that's fine. But when you attack that as vehemently as you do seemingly, or close to it, right? Maybe not as, but close to, and you talk about it as much with the same volume and frequency as you do when he doesn't talk about a race issue that you believe he should talk about. When you put those things anywhere in the same neighborhood, that's the imbalance, right? You're going too far. You've gone too far in that direction, and the response you're going to get is too far. So you have to, if you want to affect that change, you have to meet people. We're going to get to the middle either way, through extremes or meeting there. So if you come in a little bit, just closer to objective truth and what's actually happening, and let the facts speak for themselves. If you don't have to add the hyperbole, if you don't have to add the volume and the frequency, if you don't have to omit certain facts, let the truth be what the truth is. If you come in a little bit, that side will come in too, because the balance will be struck, and they won't feel the need to be all the way over there. They'll meet you in the middle as well. And the meet in the middle isn't a political, ideological, policy point that you meet in the middle on policies, and that's bullshit. I'm not going to give in. No. The idea is you meet in the middle in terms of logic, in terms of trying to seek objective truth, in terms of trying to keep the rhetoric focused where it should be and the conversation focused where it should be. That's meeting in the middle. You don't have to add anything extra. You don't have to add the emotional charge and all those things. So if you meet in the middle and you find that balance that way, I think that's the key. I think that's what will help truly improve the situation somewhat. And the reality is, at least the way that I think it works, the balance is going to be struck one way or another. It's just a question if you want to do it the really painful way where we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, or if we meet closer together and work towards it, which seems like the much better option.